Welcome to our weekly program, The Inside Story of Chabad in America through the Mindel Archives. In our previous few programs, we discussed about the Rebbe's opinion about converts, about Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. We spoke about the speech that Rabbi Mindel gave to the UN, and the Rebbe wrote notations, and about prayer in public school, ethics. Today, I want to discuss a letter that someone asked the Rebbe about a mamzer, about a bastard. You know, the Rebbe dealt with all different topics. And this letter, part of the letter, I put in the 5th volume that just came out 2 weeks ago of the Letter in the Spirit. So part of this letter that I will discuss was written in this book. You can buy the book now in the stores. You can also buy it on Amazon. So he asked the Rebbe about a mamzer, and at the end of the program, I also have a story. I want to tell you. First of all, I want to say, what is a mamzer? A mamzer is a child that is born from certain relationships prohibited that we read on Yom Kippur by Mincha. You can look it up. All the arayas. A brother, if he marries a sister, the child is a mamzer, whatever. Now, the most common mamzer is if a woman who is married to a man with 2 kosher witnesses, that woman goes and lives with another man while she's married to her husband, and they have a child, that child is called a mamzer. Of course, if you marry with 2 kosher witnesses, a reform marriage is not called a marriage, because there's no kosher 2 witnesses. Maybe there is, but usually it's not. So the child, if she goes and she does that, then the child is not a mamzer. It's only if you marry kosher with 2 witnesses, and that's a mamzer. What's the problem with a mamzer? A mamzer is a regular yid, a yid that shomer Torah mitzvahs, just like everybody else, just like all of us. The difference is he's different. What? He cannot marry a regular Jewish girl. He can only marry a mamzeres, that she's also a mamzer. And this goes l'olam v'od. This is what Torah says. So, a person asks the Rebbe, something must be done to save innocent, illegitimate Jewish children, he called it illegitimate, mamzer, from being thrust into a special Jewish caste, to put them in a different class. That's what said the Rebbe. Why? It's not their fault. Why should we put a mamzer in a different class? He did nothing wrong. And the cruelty of Torah, he writes, that mamzerim, bastards, cannot marry. What's their fault? That's the fault of the parents. That's how he writes to the Rebbe. Now, the Rebbe was very surprised that this person, I guess the Rebbe knew this person, had this question. The Rebbe said, I'm amazed that you are, I guess, a Ben Torah, and you should ask such a question. And the Rebbe says, the prohibition of intermarriage with mamzerim is not a matter of punishment, nor it's a new law. It is a law as divine and honored as Torah itself. Torah, the Rebbe says, is called Torah's chesed. Torah is kind. Torah is called Torah's chayim. Torah is kind and justice. And the Torah says, "V'ahavta l'reyacha kamoicha." Love every yid. The Torah says that parents don't die because of children, children die because of parents. So Torah is chesed. So there is a reason why Torah says that a mamzer, that you cannot marry a mamzer cannot marry a regular Jew. And then the Rebbe gives a mashal, and I'll read just a paragraph. Suppose at the time of conception, the parents were in a state of intoxication or under the influence of drugs, or were themselves afflicted by some disease. In such a case, medical science has declared that experience has shown that the embryo and the infants born will be affected physically or mentally, or both. This is a fact. They're born by such parents. So the children, is it the children's fault? No. The parents didn't behave the way they should. It is clear that here is a case where the cause of the child's affliction is entirely traced to the parents. For the child itself is the innocent sufferer. But if this actually comes to pass, the children so born must receive special care and attention, inasmuch as they are born with physical or mental disorders through the fault of the parents. But they have to be taken care differently, as the Rebbe will say in the next paragraph. They cannot be, you can't say that these children that are born mentally or they have heart problems or blind or whatever it is, that they should go to a regular school. Nobody's going to say that. But is it the child's fault? It's the parents' fault. Then the Rebbe says further, suppose further that someone would start a campaign claiming that inasmuch as the children are entirely innocent, in this case, they should not be restricted in any way and should be allowed to grow up and conduct themselves like any other normal child. Clearly, this would not be good, not only for the environment, but would be injustice also to the children themselves. So how can you, when you say that you should put him in a different class, why put him in a different class? You have these kind of children that were born, you have to put them in a different class. That's a normal thing. Now, the same thing also, when a child is born from such parents, this is the nature. If parents behave the way they behaved, and they have a child, the child is a mamzer. And the Rabbi, I think in another place, gives another mashal. A person puts his finger in hot water and he gets blisters. Are you going to blame why they put the blisters? What are you going to blame? Why did you put it in hot water? In other words, parents didn't behave right. This is the nature. The result is that the child is a mamzer. It's not his fault. Now the Rebbe writes in another place, I do not think anyone would care to challenge medical science today, even though it is relatively young in development and has undergone various changes in the past. Surely one should not be to challenge the science, will not challenge the science of Torah, which came down to us about 3,500 years ago. And despite the ups and downs of time and place, has remained steadfast and unchangeable, because Torah is eternal. God, the healer of all flesh, who works wondrously, has given definite instructions as to how these children should be treated, which can only be for their own benefit, as well as for the benefit of all, and any attempt to interfere with this world. Not only not be helpful to the children, but rather it will be harmful. And then the Rebbe ends off. Although much more could be said on this subject, I trust that the above will be suffice for you. I will emphasize again that there can be no contradiction between the fact that the Torah is the Torah's chesed, the law of loving kindness, and that God is merciful and gracious, with a verse we find in the Torah itself. It says in Kehelis, I have seen the tears of those who have been wronged, which as the sages say, refers to the plight of illegitimate children. For needless to say, it is a very big pity for such children, as also emphasized in the illustration cited above, and it is truly heartbreaking that because the parents could not control themselves at a certain moment and let their passion hold sway away them, they have ruined a certain part of their offspring. And this is what the Rabbi said, that so it's not the child, but this is part of nature, that if the parents don't behave, this is the result of their relationship. Now, I wanted to mention to you a story, and I happen to know this bacher. There was a bacher, this was in the 60s, late 60s. This bacher was a yeshiva bacher, a very bacher amitzuyan, a good bacher in a yeshiva. And he was a Baal Chesed, everything. He was an older bacher, he was already in the 30s. So someone who had an older daughter came over to Rosh Yeshiva, she was looking for a shidduch, and she asked the Rosh Yeshiva for a shidduch, for a good bacher. So the Rosh Yeshiva said, I have a bacher here, an older bacher, and maybe I'll talk to him. Al Kaponim, they spoke, and she got engaged to him, and I was by the L'chaim. A few months later, they went to the chassid. There was a chassid. Went to the chassid. Before Kabbalah's Ponim, before he went to Badek the Kala, they see that he is not himself. He's very depressed. He started to cry. He was not himself. I mean, a chassid, this is the happiest time of their life. So he called over one of his friends, and he said, I want to tell you something. I cannot go to the chuppah. I am a mamzer. He knows the halacha. His mother told him exactly he's a mamzer. He knew all along. Nobody knew. I mean, of course, he had to tell the kala fainted. This is the story that happened. Why did he do this? It says, Al todinas chavercha, don't judge your someone. Tagil im kaimai. Baruch Hashem, you shouldn't be tried with that kind of a thing. He couldn't get married all the time. He didn't want to get married until somehow his Yitzhahara, whatever. He went to the chuppah, but until the chuppah, he says that's something that he can't take anymore. And Baruch Hashem, the Kala later got married. I know her. She got married. She has children. Now she's a grandmother. She's happily married. Everything is fine, Baruch Hashem. Then this. He's not married because he's a mamzer. So this is the halachas of Torah. But Torah is Torah's chesed. You can't say Torah is bad. This is what came out from such a marriage. And there's certain different halachas that the Rebbe was asked mamish everything and anything. There's so many letters about this kind of halachas that the Rebbe said. In Mirza Hashem, next week we are going to speak about, as I mentioned to you, about the presidents and Washington D.C. that my father-in-law was sent by the Friedrich Rebbe Noch. We're going to mention it with Rabbi Hecht and Rabbi Hollander. So I'll share with you next week. Thank you.